Good morning to all of you. Wow, that's a little echoey. I know I've been kind of having a bit of a lightheadedness the last couple of days. This week I've been kind of dragging. I feel like I'm getting sick, but this feels like I'm echoing in my head. Is it me? Oh, it's okay. Anyway, maybe it sounds more powerful this way. All right. Now, I don't know what's going on, but I feel like some people are trying to speed me out the door. I've had several people today ask, is this your last Sunday? No. There's still about a month. I'll be here until Easter because there's no way that after a decade of walking with you that I'm going to leave before Easter Sunday. That just can't happen. This Lenten season, we have been talking about this idea of why should we believe? Why should we believe? There are so many reasons that people give as to why they can't believe or won't believe or just can't get there, or why perhaps listening to what the scriptures might say or hearing about who Jesus is just doesn't work for them. As the people of God who have known and experienced the love of Jesus Christ, we have this focal point in our church life and in our daily lives, which is the death and resurrection of Jesus, the Son of God. And in just a few weeks from now, we are going to celebrate the love of God shown to humanity through the death of his only Son, and the power of God over death and sin demonstrated through the resurrection of Jesus on that Lord's Day, the Resurrection Day. Our whole understanding, our whole faith, our whole lives are on that one point in history, that Jesus died and that he rose again. And if he did not die and rise again, everything else that you and I are doing is not worth it. It doesn't make a difference. It doesn't really matter. Because of the death of Jesus, we believe that there is forgiveness and reconciliation with God. In light of the resurrection, we believe that there's victory over death, that there's hope for eternal life. And the risen Christ invites all of humanity to receive this salvation through belief in him. And this is what we are celebrating in this season. This morning's question that we are talking about is this question about, what about other religions? Don't all religions contain truth? How many of you have heard some version of that question around you? Don't all religions contain truth of some sort or in some way? Aren't all religions pointing to God or to the divine anyway? What's the big deal? The text that we read this morning from Psalm 96 puts it very clearly. For great is the Lord and greatly to be praised, for he is to be revered above all gods. Why? For all the gods of the peoples are idols, and the Lord is the one who made the heavens. There is only one God. That's what we believe. But how do we actually deal with that question of what about all the other religions? What about all the other ways about believing in the divine or the eternal or what comes after? Don't all religions have at least some truth in them? Well, yes, they do. Almost, I'm going to qualify it by saying almost all religions have made observations about the world we inhabit, how we as humanity live within this world we inhabit, and have asked the question, what do we do with the things that are beyond us? And some of those observations are true. That doesn't mean, though, that we then move from that idea that there are some truths within all religions to this idea that all religions are true. You see, religion as an idea, as a way of framing the way you see the world and eternity and the big things of life, religion is trying to answer the big questions that all humanity has. And they come to different answers, arrive at different conclusions. They're trying to answer, where did we come from? How do we explain the things that are beyond our understanding? What does it mean to be human at its essence? What does it mean to live a good life? What's the meaning of suffering? What is the meaning of evil? What is evil and good? What does death mean? And what happens afterwards? Some people have said, as I mentioned already, that every religion is a pathway to God or the divine. And it really doesn't matter which pathway you choose because they all lead to the same destination. Well, let me say this, and it's not just me saying it. It comes from Tim Keller and from Rebecca McLaughlin and others, many, many others. Here's the problem. To say that every religion leads to God is at best intellectual laziness, because we're not bothering to actually look closely at what's going on and to examine the truth claims of all these different religions. That's at its best, it's laziness. At its worst, it's intellectual arrogance, claiming that somehow there is a point of view from which you can have greater insight and knowledge than all others. And we'll get into that in just a little bit. But I want to encourage you, we have purchased an extra copy of these two books, Confronting Christianity and The Reason for God, and they're going to be in the church library once we're done this series, and we're not using them for our sermon prep. And I encourage you to explore these questions and to pursue these truth claims. Do you know why you believe? So let's break this down a little bit. Are we saying by this claim that there's truth in all religions, that all religions are somehow equally valid? Of course not. Of course, that doesn't even make sense. For example, there are some religions out there which are clearly dangerous. There's cults, there's groups like the Branch Davidians. How many of you remember the Branch Davidians in Waco? And there are these groups that have religious claims in which they divide people and actually twist the way that people think and act into ways that are truly evil in this world. So no, not all religions are equally valid. Some religions are just clearly false. I'm not going to go too far out on a limb here, but I will say that if you're thinking that Scientology is somehow a real religion, have you met the science fiction writer L. Ron Hubbard, who said, you know what would be great? If I would make my own religion, and then he did. So what we're actually talking about when we ask this question, are all religions equally valid? We're actually talking about these major religions that we are aware of in our world. Judaism, Christianity, Islam, Hinduism, Buddhism, maybe even Sikhs. And the question we have to ask is, do all these major religions actually point to the same thing? Are they all making efforts to describe one reality and one truth? There's a famous image that has been used in religious philosophy, is this image of a bunch of blind men trying to describe an elephant. Have you heard this imagery before? They all have a hold of a different part, and they're trying to describe. One has the trunk and says, this thing it's like a snake. There's one that's holding the leg and says, no, this thing it's like a tree trunk. There's one who's holding the ear and says, it's like a giant fan. They're all describing parts of the whole, but none of them can see the whole. It's a great illustration, unless you're a philosopher, unless you like critical reasoning, because while it illustrates a good idea that there may be more than any one person can experience or see for themselves and describe, the very illustration itself that somehow every religion is somehow grasping hold of one aspect of what the divine is, but is missing out on the others, has this at its heart. It's claiming that the problem here is blindness, and that there is somewhere, some position from which someone can see the whole thing and describe it as an elephant. It's an assumption, a place of arrogance, I would even suggest. That often those who are in the place of secular humanism or whatever words, labels you want to apply to it, say, oh, we know better than all those religions. They're all trying to talk about this thing, but only those who have no religion can actually see the whole thing. I would disagree. Another problem here is this idea that to challenge someone else's beliefs and to say that there is a religious perspective that has truth, not just true things, but contains a truth, is somehow offensive to others. Now, I have been pastoring long enough to know that there are people who certainly are offensive when they talk about religious things. Absolutely. There are many Christians who are offensive when they talk about how Christianity is the truth. But to merely challenge religious thinking is not offensive. It's only offensive if we don't actually respect the person with which we are engaging. A willingness to say, you see the world differently than I see it. Tell me why you see it that way. I'll tell you why I see it this way. Can we talk? Can we engage? And to assume that someone who is in another religious worldview is not able to enter into that conversation is to assume that they are unable to think or that they are unable to act, to be rational and to engage human to human, which, if you ask me, is as disrespectful as you can be to someone. I'm not going to talk to you about the thing that shapes my whole worldview because I don't think you'll get it. Some people have this objection to one religion being different than others. And that's this idea that religious experience is culturally conditioned. That the only reason you believe what you believe is because of where you were born and the world that you live in and inhabit. This is the idea that if I was born somewhere in North Africa, I would most likely be a Muslim. I would believe that Islam is the true religion. If I was born in the heart of India, I would be a Hindu. If I was born somewhere in Southeast Asia, Buddhism would be the framework through which my whole life would be framed. This, in fact, is also a problematic viewpoint, in that the only one who is in the place to describe this supposed place from which I can see that everything is culturally conditioned is the one who is somehow apart from it. The secular skeptic is the only one who can see all these things for what they truly are. The problem is that if you're a secular humanist skeptic, is that only because you were raised in an environment where you were told that you ought to be a skeptic? It defeats the argument itself. For ourselves, in our own context, the world that you and I inhabit here and now, in this place in Fort Garry and in Winnipeg, the truth is that the world is much different than it has been for many, many millennia. We live in a very pluralistic context where there is freedom to choose, freedom to explore, freedom to ask questions. So maybe it's about our family cultures then that describe why I would believe what I believe. These are problems that must be considered. But it goes further. The problem with saying that all religions contain the truth or a truth is exactly that, the problem of what truth is. We're all familiar with the relativistic claims of that's your truth, this is my truth. But those kinds of perspective-bearing truths that are formed by my opinion or what I think or how I have seen or experienced things must also run into things like historical truth. Things that did or did not happen. Often when we say that this is your truth and that's my truth, or there's other truths out there, what we're talking about is not actually a truth. It's just a way of thinking. Truth is something which simply is or is not. It is either true or it is not true. What I think about it doesn't make a difference as to whether it's true or not. It's like a fact, not an alternative fact, as you may have heard others claim. You see, Christianity makes a truth claim. Aside from all the other things that Christianity says and does and the beliefs that are inherited, at its heart, it makes a truth claim. That there was a person, Jesus, a person who died and came back to life in a particular place, at a particular time, in a particular way that people saw and gave witness to, and now their whole worldview has changed because of it. It's either true or it's not true. You have to get past that idea of there being a truth at the heart of it before you can evaluate its claims. There's another problem with this idea that all religions have something to say about the divine and about truth. That's the problem of monotheism. For millennia, monotheism was not a thing. Monotheism, one God. That's all it means. Mono, one, theism, God. For millennia, there was no idea that there was just one God, but that there were many. And that you would choose the one that best suited where you were and what needs you had and could best serve you. It's not a new problem. However, you go back just a couple millennia, and this idea that there was actually only one God arrives on the scene. And not only in Judea, in the land of Israel with the Jewish people, it shows up in a few other places as well. The problem here is that if there is one God, that means there are no other gods. And you have this clash of worlds. The ancient world was filled with gods. One of the accusations against the Christians of the early church was that they were atheists, that they didn't believe in the gods. You see, the way that it worked in the ancient world was, that's fine if your God, your religion is different than mine. You have some pieces, I have some pieces. They're probably both true. Let's just add them together. And so in my little altar in my home or in the temple that we would go to, there would be my God, which we think is the best one. And then on top of that, we would add a few others just to cover the bases and make sure that we didn't miss anything and that we could get all of the favors that we needed from the different gods. When Christianity, as an offshoot of Judaism, enters into that polytheistic world, it turns things upside down. So then we get to the problem of Jesus. If all religions contain truth and we can kind of hold them all with an equal hand, then we have to deal with the problem of Jesus himself. The Jesus that we call Messiah, the Jesus that we call the Son of God, the only begotten of God. By the way, only begotten does not just mean the only born Son of God. It means begotten is something more than just birth order. Or only. There's something holy, divine, different about the only begotten Son of God. C.S. Lewis gets mentioned a lot, not only from our pulpit, but in Western civilization's questions about religion. And the reason for that is that he was an unparalleled philosopher, a skeptic who turned in his searchings and found Jesus. And described in several of his books that process of coming to the realization that there was one person that makes a difference, that changes everything. What he says is this, is either Jesus is who he says he is or he is not who he says he is. It is either true that Jesus died and rose again or it is not. Jesus is either the Son of God who can forgive sin and who makes a way for us to be with God, or he is not. If you call Jesus just a good teacher or a prophet, but just one among many, then what you have to admit philosophically, intellectually, with your critical reasoning, is then Jesus is a liar. And if he's a liar, then he's not a good teacher. And if he's a liar, then how can he be a prophet bringing truth? Or maybe he's crazy. He actually didn't know what he was saying. He truly believed it, but he actually was just crazy. But that's all that you're left with. Either what he said about himself as being the Son of God is true or it's not true. It leaves no room for synthesizing together with other religions and holding them all with an open hand. You see, following Jesus is different from all other religious teachings in our world. Let me explain why. Every other religion has a God or divine that is unknowable, distant, and impersonal. Only in Jesus do we have a God who loves and is personal and knowable. Every other religion places human efforts and behaviors at the center of its religious practices and teachings. You do things to get the attention of the God that you want favors from, so that he'll say yes to your prayers instead of no, so that he'll spare you rather than smite you, or that you do enough good in your lifetime to outweigh all the bad, so that you can achieve a good eternal outcome, whether that's in one lifetime or over the span of many lifetimes around the wheel again and again. Or, in order to achieve these things, you must become detached enough from the world that you live in so that you eventually just drift on into and merge with the divine, the eternal. Or you must overcome the passions and desires of what it means to be human so that you can achieve a release into cosmic consciousness. Only in Christianity is God knowable and personable and loves humanity. Only in Christianity is it the actions of God and God alone that achieve salvation for us. The Christian faith, as articulated in the gospel, the good news, is not a religion per se. There are plenty of things about the Christian faith which have religious teachings, religious activities, religious things, and yes, it is a religion. But at the heart of it, the gospel of Jesus is not a religion. It is a relationship with a living God, the creator and the sustainer. And it makes a claim in history upon which everything else stands or falls. Not only Christianity itself, but all other religious views. That Jesus was a real person, born in the land of Israel, in the city of Bethlehem, that he was put to death for what he taught and because of his claim to be the divine Son of God. And that this Jesus then came back to life as the one who overcomes death and makes it possible for all of humanity also to be free from the power of death and sin. It makes a claim of truth, one claim. And it is on the basis of that one claim of truth which we must answer this question: don't all religions have truth? There are true things in all religions, yes. But only in Christ do we find the truth that saves us all. This truth is what we celebrate at the Lord's table, and we're going to celebrate today as we remember what God has done through Jesus for us.